Good afternoon, good morning. Uh, uh, Hello, everyone. This is Robert Parisi, President of InnQuest Software, and this is webinar number 7 of InnQuest Live. And with me is Christy Carnley, the Product Manager of InnQuest Software. And what we're going to do for this hour is things that are not webbook, everything but. So what we're going to go over today is okay. We're gonna let me just go over the guidelines. Sorry about that. Okay, this is good. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so we're gonna do a tip of the month. Christy's gonna do that, and then we're gonna talk about what's new in the upcoming version 1650, and we'll be coming out with that sometime next week. It's an easy upgrade. It's one of those simple help check for updates and install it. So it's got a ton of things in it. I know there's like 20, 30 things. Christy's going to go over the big points in that. And then we'll do the feature presentation, which is writing SQL queries for the letter scheduler. And we're going to do some basic beginner reports in interactive SQL. And we're also going to talk about the reserve total stay function in SQL. But I just want to talk for the first 5 minutes is EMV, because we keep getting a lot of stuff on that. So with EMV, that is the liability shift for EMV in October 1st. Now, we will have this web page, which is all you need to do is go to InnQuest.com/EMV. So that's all you have to do is just InnQuest.com/EMV, and we will keep this updated all the time, constantly, for the rest of the year of what our status is of EMV, what you have to do, what we're doing, where we are, and everything. So there's no need to contact our support department, Shift 4, the sales office, or anybody, or post on the forum. When something new comes out with EMV, or when we know something new, we are going to put it here. So all you need to do is come to here, InnQuest.com/EMV. Couple of things. Right now, as of today, there is no processor that supports EMV in Shift 4. There is 0 processors. So right now, if we were ready to go with EMV, everybody here at this webinar, there is none of your processors are certified with Shift 4. So nobody is ready for this. So just be aware of that. We had just a curveball thrown at us in order to be able to process transactions in the way that Room Master has been doing it for the last 13 years. So Shift 4 is making accommodation for us so that we don't have to retrain our customers and take away functionality. The functionality specifically is you can only, in other property management systems, you can only enter one credit card transaction for the day for each credit card on a folio. You can't do more than one. And you know in Room Master that you can do that. And we are one of the only property management systems that allow that in Shift 4. And they wanted to take that away from us in EMV. But we fought hard, and we're going to get that. But they are making some changes in order to accommodate that. So because of that, we are definitely not going to make the October 1st deadline. But regardless, right now, no processor is certified to handle it anyway. We will have EMV sometime this year, but it won't be October 1st. The liability shift is, and I want to clarify, what is the liability shift? It is not chargebacks. It's not anything like that. The liability shift is simply if somebody shows up at your hotel, physically gives you a credit card, you scan that credit card, and that credit card is a counterfeit credit card, a card that is counterfeit, one where the number on the front is not the number that's on the mag stripe. It has nothing to do with chargebacks. It has nothing to do with deposits or keyed-in transactions or GDS transactions or anything like that. It's specifically a liability shift that if some waiter was in a restaurant took somebody's credit card, went back into the back, scanned it on their belt to obtain the strip, then went home and manufactured a credit card with the emblem and everything on it, created a card, then showed up at your hotel and used that card. That is all what EMV liability shift is about. So just be aware and we know that in the hospitality industry, specifically the hotel industry, it doesn't happen. So it's not something that you need to be worried about. But you can read about it all here in InnQuest.com/EMV, and when it comes out, we'll be ready. Now, just go to the bottom for me, Christy. I just want to point out just the pricing on EMV. It's a lot of work on our part. There's devices, and so if you have 3 terminals or less that you will be doing EMV on, you should budget about $2,400 for every 3 devices. So be aware that EMV costs money. The credit card companies are enforcing this, so you have to buy the devices, we have to install them, we have to do the programming, there's got to be software that has to get installed. So if you have 1 to 3 devices, you should budget $2,400. If you have 4 to 6 devices, you should budget about $4,800 this year to install and convert to EMV if you're going to EMV. So I just want people to be aware so they have that money budgeted. That's really all I have to say right now on EMV. So, so right now I'm going to pass this over to Christy.
Good afternoon. And so what we're going to do first is go through the what's new for version 1650, and then I'll cover the tip of the month, and then we'll get into our feature presentation. So, as Robert said, version 1650 will be released sometime next week, and it is an update, so it's not a version upgrade, it's just an update within version 16. So if you are already on version 16, if you've already installed the upgrade to 16, then all you will do is help and check for updates. And once you do that help check for updates, it'll tell you there's an update available, download and install that update on your server. Of course, all users have to be out of both Brewmaster and Point of Sale. Close down your interfaces such as IQ WorldLink API, your print manager, in order to install that update. And just want to make note of this before we cover some of the new features that are going to be included in this update. There is a change for the Booking.com interface. So if you have the Booking.com interface, the direct connect through Booking.com from Roommaster to Booking.com, it is required that you install version 1650 prior to December 1st of this year. If you do not install version 1650 prior to December 1st, then your interface will stop working until you have that update installed. And it's just due to a change that's being made on the Booking.com interface to add some additional security to the passwords that are being used, and so we had to make some changes to accommodate that. So just wanted to mention that. So let's go through some of the new features that are going to be in the 1650 release. First, we'll start with IQ WorldLink and some new things that are included in IQ WorldLink. So I'm just opening up IQ WorldLink, and for anyone who is interfacing to either a GDS or to Booking.com or Expedia, your IQ WorldLink application is what is handling that interface, and just a couple of changes, enhancements that we've made. You have if you are charging deposits, so if when your reservations post through IQ WorldLink, you have it set to charge a deposit automatically, and of course that's set on the rate code level to charge that deposit. You currently have the ability to flag all reservations that come through that interface. So you have this flag, the main flag here, that all reservations that post through are flagging for follow-up, so that it's easy to locate those reservations that are coming in from a third-party site. We have a secondary flag available now that you can set if the deposit fails. So if you're charging deposits and for some reason that deposit fails, so if the credit card declines or it's a bad card number, bad expiration date, it can't charge the deposit through the Shift4 interface, then it will flag with a different color flag so that it notifies you that the deposit did not successfully post and gives you the opportunity to contact that guest to obtain another form of payment if you are requiring deposits for your reservations. And then this, of course, will be used along with IQ Webbook once we release IQ Webbook later this year and give you the ability to charge, of course you can still charge deposits on IQ Webbook, but give you the ability to flag that reservation with a different flag if for some reason that deposit fails. Another change that we made, and this is just to make mention of this, doesn't necessarily have an effect on your day-to-day operation of IQ World Link, but this is the change that we had to make for Booking.com, the ability to have longer and fully encrypted passwords. So if you ever come into this tab, the HTMG tab, there's a new field here that's just an override encrypted password. And that's the password that's used to connect and pull reservations, modifications, cancellations, and then also to post inventory and rates. And then just for general support purposes, but also if you review your log file at all for IQ World Link, if you have exclusions on your room types, those will now write to the log file, so it makes it easier to see what's being excluded from inventory that's being sent. So close out of IQ World Link and go into Room Master. And we added a new rate designation, rate usage, to your rate codes to be able to say that so in version 16, we added the ability to say it's a normal rate or a popular and common rate. Well, we've added a third rate usage, and that's the ability to say that it's a groups only rate. So you'll notice there's a new column on this screen when you go to 1650, and that's providing you with the rate usage. And then there is a new option here. So before you would have just had normal and then popular and common rate. Well, now you have the option for groups only. So it gives you the ability to set a rate that it's only used for groups. That's the only way that this rate is used in the system. And we'll take a look at just a second. Changes how the rate will display if you're displaying it on the availability screen. Also, you can ignore these when you're looking at it from a display rates. And then this will be used in conjunction with IQ Webbook as well when you are sending up rates that are used only for groups. And so you don't want them to display on the actual booking engine. They're only to be associated with groups, with group blocks that you're setting up that have that rate code associated with it. So if we go really quickly, just close here. So from your display rates screen, you'll have a new option to be able to say ignore group rates. So there's my GRP 1, 2, and 3 rates that are displaying when I go into the display rates. If I wanted to ignore group rates, then I can check that option, and that just removes them from or suppresses them from the display, so you're not looking at any rates that are set as a groups only. And then also from the availability screen, we do a display rates on the availability screen. You've got 3 sections here. So the top section is, of course, still your popular and common rates. The middle section is going to be your normal rates. And then if you are displaying your group rates on the availability screen, those would display in the bottom section. So you now have 3 separate sections in your show rates options. And again, you may have your group rates set to hide on the availability screen, and that's fine. You can still do so. But if you are showing them on the availability screen, they'll be in that 3rd section there if they're designated as groups only. And then since we added the option to have an additional follow-up flag for if you have a deposit failure coming through one of your interfaces, we added a 10th follow-up flag. So if we just go to setup, configuration, reservations, and into setup flags, you now have 10 follow-up flags. So the new one is a burgundy or maroon color. And that one can, use as long as once you upgrade, all you would need to do is put in what you want that flag designated as. So put in a label on it, and then that flag becomes available for use and can be used, for anything. Doesn't necessarily have to, if you don't charge deposits, then if you just needed a 10th follow-up flag, if you're heavily using the follow-up flags, you now have that 10th one available. And so you can set that up, of course, from setup flags or from the reservation screen itself by going into follow-up and then setup flags when you're signed in as a manager. On the find window, we added a new option to be able to ignore history. So for example, if we search for my last name, if we just do a find now, I have a ton of history sitting out there. And so when you're searching for something, if you're not interested in anything that's in history, whether it be a reservation or whether it be an actual historical folio, there's a new option here to ignore history. So when under the where, if you click on ignore history and then do find now, then it's only going to show you active records. So it only show you anything active in reserve, only show you anything active in folios or profiles. So it just gives you a way to limit your find results with, not look at the history, especially if you have a repeat guest that comes multiple times throughout the year and you only want to look at active reservations or profiles and want to ignore anything that's in history. And then, of course, with IQ Webbook coming, the ability to book groups online will, of course, be available with the booking engine. And so all of your group reservations will be, or group blocks will be sent automatically to the booking engine. And we've added a new field because we needed to give the ability for you to set a booking date for when that group can start booking online, because you may have a group that you've put in, you've put in all of the block details, and you're maybe waiting on a contract, or you don't want to release that group to start booking online until a certain date. So there's a new date field on your group block. So if we go into our InnQuest holiday party group, it's called web booking date. And so you'll notice the screen looks a little bit different. We had to move some things around in order to fit this in, but you'll still have your check-in, check-out date. Of course, still have your release date for the group. But then if you are using IQ Webbook, you would put in a web booking date. And what this does is it'll go ahead and send, as soon as you create the group block, IQ WorldLink's going to go ahead and pick that up and send the notification to IQ Webbook with all of the details of the group block. But it'll set it as a closed status, so not accepting new reservations. So if someone were to put in that group code on your booking engine, it'll just say not accepting reservations at this time, please contact the hotel. But on the night that the audit runs, so for example, when I run the night audit to move the date from September 30th to October 1st, then the audit's going to automatically flag this group as it needs to be sent to IQ Webbook. So the next cycle, IQ WorldLink will pick that up, and it'll send that this group is now open. And so that way it enables that group to be booked online, and then you can start taking reservations on the booking engine. So it just gives you a way to go ahead and put in a group block, but if you're not quite ready for that group to start booking, or for some reason you're setting a date in the future when they can actually start booking on the booking engine, then you can go ahead and put that date in. You can, of course, leave this date blank, and if you leave the date blank, then it just means, and if you don't have it set for, it's a tentative group block or no new reservations, it just means as soon as you put that in, it's going to send to the booking engine. Provided the group has the group code, they'll be able to book on the booking engine within a few minutes. And then we'll take a look at a couple of things that are in the point of sale, and then I'll cover a few features from the Premier Edition, and then we'll get into our tip of the month. So I'm going to switch over to the point of sale, and just a couple of enhancements for the point of sale. On your recall order window and your recall close check, we'll now display the outlet name. So if you're signed in as either a supervisor or a clerk level, of course, you can only see orders within your location or within your outlet. So for example, if I go into functions and I select to recall a closed check, across the top in the title bar, it will now show you which outlet you're selected on. And this is an effort to help in case you are trying to pull something up from the front desk and don't realize that the front desk is set to a different outlet than the restaurant, and so you're not able to see the order, but maybe if the auditor's trying to do the end of day and they're going and looking for a check that's still on hold that's preventing them from doing the end of day, it'll show across the top, because that auditor may not be able to get into configuration to actually see which outlet it's pulling from. So it's just showing you across the top which outlet you're looking at. And the same if you went in to recall a check So if you're recalling a check that's on hold, across in the title bar across the top, it's just going to show the name of the outlet. And that's just the outlet that's selected for this particular workstation. And of course, it's across the title bar and the terminal, that's always been that way. But it's just to aid to know exactly which outlet the system is looking at when it's looking for recalling a closed check or when it's looking for recalling a check that has been on hold. And then one enhancement that we made to the video station, and if you're not currently using the video station, this is a feature that's available with the Premier Edition. And it gives you the ability, rather than having like a receipt printer or a kitchen printer in your kitchen, you can have a monitor that is a video display, and it's displaying the orders as they are placed in the system and put on hold. And so rather than just printing out on our printer, it's displaying on a video station, and that's what this is. And we've enhanced this in 1650 to give you the ability to display more on the screen. So if we go into the setup, and this is when you're on a multi-display, so if we go to the multi-display tab, your boxes across, you can now set this up to 6. So you can do 4 across, 5 across, or 6 across. Just depends on really the size of your monitor and how much you need to display, how busy of a kitchen you have if you're using this to see. So you'll notice I just changed it to 5, so the boxes are a little bit bigger spread across. But it just depends on how many orders you typically have on hold at one time. If you are finding that you're set at 4, and once you go to 1650, it may help you to go to 6 to be able to display more on the screen at one time. So we'll close out of there. I'll go ahead and exit point of sale. And then just a few features that we've added that are specific to the Premier Edition in version 16.5. The flag setup option. So we added the flag setup option, and as you know, the follow-up tab is available in the Premier Edition only from the Quick Room display. And you've always been able to, as supervisor manager, clear the flags, but now you also have the option for setup flags. So there's a new button here, so you can set up the flags from the Quick Room screen, just like you can from Reserve screen or by going into configuration. So that button will now be on there in version 16.5. And then also, if you use the interactive SQL and write SQL queries, and then you take those queries and embed them as an SQL report so that you have them to be able to run all the time, we made some changes when you are embedding a new report. So just say, for example, I'm going into my group guest history and profiles category, and I'm going to insert a new report. When you insert, we moved up the report type of embedded SQL as the first option, and also default to that. So it no longer defaults to, I believe the first option used to be Query and Report Writer. And that was because prior to us having the Premier Edition, that was the main type of external report you could write, was either a crystal report or a Clarion report. Well, now the most popular, of course, is the embedded SQL report, and the one that most everyone is using. So we just moved that as the first option and default to that. So if you are using crystal reports and you add crystal reports to your reports menu, of course, you just have to click crystal reports in order to get to that. And then finally, and this was a pretty big enhancement, sometimes it's hard to see, or understand all the coding that goes in behind this, but this is a huge enhancement and a lot of coding, but it's very useful. It is more of a advanced knowledge of SQL feature, but it creates so many possibilities with your runtime variables. So with your reservation rules for several versions now, you've been able to use SQL in your reservation rules. So if you're writing advanced rules for your reservation rules, not only can you use Clarion syntax, but you can also use an SQL syntax if you have the Premier Edition. Well, we've added that same feature to your runtime variables. So if anyone attended the webinar, I think the IQ Lab a couple of months ago, we went through runtime variables and using runtime variables in your reservation letters to simplify them and give you more options. And so you can now, with runtime variables, you can use SQL syntax. So I have one pre-built here, and mine is just looking at if there are any reservations that have account code 115, in the daily charges, and that's my flowers add-on. And so I'm looking for anytime a reservation has that account code in the daily charges. When that's true, I want there's specific text I want to put into a confirmation letter. And when it's false, either there's no text, or in my case, I did put some text in there when it's false. So what this is doing is using SQL, and instead of querying syntax. So you're putting the SQL followed by open and close parentheses, and of course your SQL statement is in between those parentheses. And essentially how this works, you have to return a single value. So when you're writing an SQL statement, and that's why I said this is an advanced feature and would require some advanced knowledge of writing SQL statements, but you're returning a single value. So it's either a 0 or greater than 0 if you're doing a conditional if-then type of variable. So if you're saying there's a true and there's a false, well, of course, when it's true, it's greater than 0. When it's false, it's 0 for your true-false statement. And then you could do this with a calculation formula as well. But it has to return a single value. So for example, my SQL statement is here in between these parentheses. And so I'm looking for a count of how many reservations with the other key, and that's your daily charges, and then it's looking for that the particular reservation confirmation number, and the account code is 115. So I'm looking for how many reservations do I have when I'm sending out this this letter? Do I have does this reservation have a daily charge on it using account code 115? If it does, then I want to do this true statement. If it doesn't, then I want to do this false statement. So I've got this variable already added into a letter. So we'll just show you exactly, we'll just pull up two confirmation numbers here. So if we go to 8453, and so under more options, daily charges, I do have an add-on here for flowers. So when I send this confirmation letter, then it's going to put my true text in there. So there's my variable, and it's saying, per your request, flowers will be placed in your room upon your arrival. And that's based on that SQL statement. So that's based on that SQL statement running and saying, yes, I do find this particular confirmation number, and it's account code 115 in the other charges, which is your daily charges. And so that's true because it equals 1. So that's why the per your request, flowers will be placed in your room. Whereas if we go to a reservation that doesn't have anything in daily charges, then when we pull this same letter, the variable is now false, so different text is displaying. So celebrating a special event, inquire our front desk about having flowers placed in the room. So it just gives you a lot more powerful options with the runtime variables. And we did update the help text so that all of this information is contained in the help text. And like I said, it's a little bit more of an advanced feature, but for those of you that have been using the SQL with your reservation rules, it'd be very helpful to be able to use it in your runtime variables. Okay, so that's everything on version 16.50, and of course there are a lot of fixes as well in 16.50, so if you're interested in seeing what's in 16.50, you can click on Web Help, and here's all of everything will appear under Open Issues because this version has not been released yet, so here's everything that's going into version 16.50. You can see that there's a lot of stuff, so not just what I covered was the new, everything that's new, but there are a lot of bug fixes and changes as well, some things that have been reported. So it's a pretty important release, and once we release that next week, you'll definitely want to install that update. Okay, so we'll move on into our tip of the month. And this month, what we wanted to take a look at is IQ Schedule. And just a couple of features, quick features that come along with IQ Schedule. And essentially, just briefly, if you're not familiar with the product IQ Schedule, many different things that this can be used for, but essentially it's a scheduling piece it's an add-on to Room Master to give you the ability to schedule and do spa. If you maybe rent bicycles, or you rent kayaks or boats or something at your property, and you have a certain amount of inventory of that, and so you need to keep track of who's rented it, or if you have golf and you want to be able to keep track of tee times. If there's or if you do some type of tours, and so you want to be able to have people, schedule people for tours. There's a multitude of things that this can be used for. Can be used for meeting rooms as well. And so basically, with the IQ schedule, it interfaces seamlessly into both Room Master and then, of course, point of sale. If you are billing, so for example, with a spa, you would be billing that guest when they're leaving, and so it integrates into the point of sale. But just quickly wanted to go through and show you a couple of pretty cool features that come along with this when you're using IQ Schedule. So for example, if you're canceling a reservation, so I'm just going to pull up reservation 8450. And you'll notice the IQ Schedule tab, and it is red. So this reservation is booked for a while on September 24th for 3 nights in a deluxe room. And then the IQ Schedule tab being red lets me know that this guest also has things scheduled as far as for one of our calendars in the IQ Schedule, and this one being our spa. So they have several spa appointments booked during their stay. So if I were this reservation, when I select cancel reservation, you'll notice the screen is a little bit different. And that's because it's also prompting me to cancel their scheduled events. So if you're currently using an external system for your spa or an external system for keeping track of any type of rentals or anything, and then you know a lot of times those things get orphaned because the reservation gets canceled, but the front desk forgets to ask, and the guest forgets to tell them that they had something scheduled in the spa, or they had some appointments, or they had a golf tea time, or they had, a bicycle reserved for their stay. And so you're holding those items when you could have released them, and those times could have gone to another guest. So by using IQ Schedule, it's prompting you automatically to cancel everything in the above range. So it's looking at everything that's within the range of this reservation. Now it does go by guest profile. So if that guest had a future reservation and had future appointments, this would be your out-of-range appointments. Or if the guest had booked something for a couple of days after their checkout because they were still going to be in the area and they were doing something still at your property, then these would show as out of range. And so anything out of range is not within the check-in, check-out date of this particular booking. But when we select OK to cancel the reservation, that means the reservation is canceled, but also all of those IQ Schedule, everything that was in IQ Schedule is also automatically canceled. So it just canceled out those events and cleared the calendar on those dates, so you're not holding spa appointments for a guest that's not even coming now. Another feature that comes along with using IQ Schedule is if you're modifying dates within a reservation. So if we pull up a different reservation, we'll go to 8452 for Francine Arnold. So Francine is arriving on October 30th for 2 nights, and she has several spa appointments during her stay. So if Francine called to say that she's going to need to come the following Friday. Something had happened, and now she can't come on the 30th, but she would like to come on the following Friday. So if we change her check-in date to November 6th for 2 nights, well, the IQ Schedule tab is red, so that's letting you know that there are events that have been booked. And when you go to IQ Schedule, it changes these to an alert because these are now not within the range of the reservation because you've changed the dates. And so it's alerting that staff member, whomever is speaking to Francine, that they also need to update her spa appointments. And so you could go right to IQ Schedule, and we could go to the 30th and be able to update Francine's spa appointments that she has on the 30th and the 31st, so we can then change these to the 6th, and then we can go forward 1 day to the 31st, showing her name on there. So if we're going to book her in for the 7th instead, and be able to book her in for the 7th instead on this one. So now we've updated all her appointments. Our warning signs go away, and now we've just not only updated that reservation, but we also updated all of our spa appointments. So the guest still has her appointments when she arrives. Spa is not holding appointments for a guest that's not coming, and everybody is happy. And then finally, when you are checking in a reservation, so if you're checking in a reservation that has spa appointments, so we'll just go to our quick room display, and we'll check in Claire Bennett. And you'll notice that Claire and her husband both have some events scheduled during their stay. So her husband's doing a couple of fishing tours, and then Claire's going to the spa. So when we check this guest in, we'll just quickly run through the check-in wizard. And do a check-in. It's going to bring up a guest itinerary automatically. So your front desk staff can print that out and hand that to the guest at check-in and say, here's your itinerary of events that you have scheduled during your stay. It's giving the date, the time, the guest name, because you can set the guest name as different. So because it's John going to the marina and doing an Eagle Fish 3 hours and an Old Bay full day on September 12th, we of course got his name on there, and then Claire's actually going to the spa on Friday, September 11th. So you can print that out and provide that to the guests. They have an itinerary of all the events that they have scheduled at your property during their stay. Go ahead and print there. And close. So that's the IQ Schedule product. So if you have things that you are scheduling at your property, or if you have a spa at your property, and, pretty much anything, if you're renting bicycles, something even that simple, then, and you're interested in taking a look at IQ Schedule, you can contact your local sales office and request a demo of the product. And again, like I said, it is an add-on, and a couple of different levels to additions, actually, of what you can purchase on IQ Schedule, depending on your needs. So it depends on what you're using it for, how many calendars and resources you need within the product. So that's our tip of the month, to show you something a little different that we don't normally touch on, which is the IQ Schedule product and some of the cool features that come along with that. So we're going to move into our feature presentation. And our feature presentation today is a combination. It's, of course, focusing on features that are contained in the Premier Edition. And the first one we're going to look at is the Letter Scheduler. And a specific option that was added, we kind of snuck it in, and so a lot of people aren't aware of it, and all the features that all the flexibility it gives you with the Letter Scheduler. So that's why I wanted to cover it today, to make sure that you are aware of it. So this was in, I'm trying to remember, I think it was 1612 that we added this feature. And so we go under Back Office, Letter Scheduler. The Letter Scheduler, of course, has been in the software for a few versions, but we enhanced the Letter Scheduler to give you a lot more flexibility with the letters that you're sending out, and to be able to use some SQL so that you can add more parameters to which records you're including when you're doing a scheduled job. So you have an option here, which is the Profile SQL statement. So previously, early in version 16, we added the profile export, and we went through this on one of the IQ Lives, and basically you're writing an SQL statement, generating an export file, and then you were importing that into your scheduled job to be able to send out those letters. You can still use that feature, but you also now have the option to just write the SQL statement directly on the scheduled job. And so if it's something that you are running every single day, of course you're not going to use an export, because you actually have to go and export that file and import it. So if this is something that you're using quite often, or you're doing it every single day, and we'll take a look at an example of doing one every single day, you may want to use the Profile SQL statement. So when you are using these two options, of course, because it says profile before it, this is going off of the guest profile. So letters that you create to use with these, let me just back out of here for just one moment. Letters that you create to use with either one of these options are going to be contained in your guest profile letters. So you wouldn't create these in your reservation letters. Your template type is going to be a guest profile letter, because it's being run off of the guest profiles. And so your first step, of course, when using this, is to create the letter that you're wanting to use with this job. And then you're coming into the Letter Scheduler, and adding in a new scheduled job, selecting profile SQL statement, and then you're selecting which letter you want to use, give it a name. So as an example, this is one, I did a marketing email fall promo. So I wrote the SQL statement for this already. We'll go through it, and then we'll step through and do this all the way through and write the SQL. But if you are proficient in SQL, you can write the SQL statement right here and just be able to put in exactly what it is that you're wanting to select, which profiles. If you are not comfortable with just writing SQL, then you can still use the wizard, get the SQL written from the wizard, which we'll take a look at in just a moment, and then come back in here and paste it in. So you still don't have to know all of the syntax for SQL to be able to use this. You can use the wizard, which will write the syntax for you based on what you select, and then be able to copy it in here. But essentially what this is saying is, I want to select only one, that's what distinct means, guest profile. I'm joining the history table because the guest profile number, I want to see the guest profile number matching, and then I want to say where his head, the rate equals rack, and the check-in dates between these dates. So basically I'm saying this is like a fall promo. So I wanted to see all guests that stayed with me last year between October 1st and October 31st of 2014 under a specific rate code. This is my demo database, so most everything's under rack. But you may have offered like a fall promo package last year for maybe you're in an area of the Northeast that guests come to see the changing of the leaves. And so last year you had a special package rate that you offered that was some type of promotional package rate, and you offered it to guests who were checking in between October 1st and October 31st. Then that way you're sending the same letter, marketing, to those guests that stayed with you last year, offering them to come back. And so you're doing some type of promotion. And so basically what that's doing is going out and pulling all those guests and based on their profile, and pulling in their information. So we pulled 52 records from our database. And so this is all guests that are sitting in history that stayed under the rack rate code between October 1st and October 31st. And then, of course, we could run this job and be able to send out this particular letter that we created to all of these guests. Another option that you can use this for is not necessarily just past guests. You could do this for current guests. We've seen a couple of things on the forum before, and requesting, saying, I want to send an email to all my guests that are departing today. And maybe I want to tell them, please stop by the front desk for something, or tell them, not necessarily, thank you for their stay yet, because they haven't actually left yet, but remind the guests, of some activity or something that's available, just, something that you want to be able to tell guests on the day that they're departing. So you can do that with the SQL statement. So we'll build one of these. So if we click on Insert, we go Profile, SQL statement, we would choose our letter, and so I'm going to just select my thank you letter. If we're going to set this as something we want to send every single day to guests that are departing, so on the guest checkout date, we want this email to go out to them. Then we're going to say, schedule this job to run after audit. And this would be similar to your pre-arrival letters or to even your departure letters. You're sending a couple of days after the guest has departed to say thank you or a survey follow-up or something, but this particular one, we're wanting to send to guests that are departing today. So we're going to schedule this job to run after the audit. And then because we selected Profile SQL Statement, we're going to go to the SQL Statement tab, and we're going to write this SQL statement. And basically what we're saying is we want to select the VIP number from folios, and we want to say where the checkout is equal to. And then across the bottom, you'll notice you have some fields here. So if this is something you're running every single day, you need, and you want it to send to guests that are checking out today, and you're running it post-audit, then you need this to be today's audit date. So you want to see where the checkout date on the folio is today's audit date. So you'll see the field across the bottom, and you have to put it in single quotes in the bracket. And we'll say audit date and then close our single quote. It's that simple. So what this is saying is, look for the guest profile number from folios where the checkout is equal to audit date. And you'll see here it says the first column must be the guest profile number. And the reason for that is the guest profile number is where the email address is contained. That's also where the setting is contained if this guest has accepted to receive emails from you. So if they're set as a do not email, you want to make sure you're attaching to the guest profile so that it's reading that, because remember, the letter scheduler will read that setting. So we go to the preview tab. This is the guests that we have in-house that are set to be depart today, and so that's who this email would go to, because their checkout date is equal to today's audit date, which is September 10th. And so then if we set this to run every single night, it's just always looking at the audit date in the system and finding all the folios that are checking out on that audit date and sending this email. So this one is one that you would say schedule to run after night audit. Now, if you're doing some type of marketing, one-time send, like what we looked at with your fall promo, that's something you're probably going to want to leave as manually run this job, because you don't want to send a marketing email for guests that stayed in October of last year on a specific rate every single day. Because you'd be essentially sending the same letter to the same guest every single day. So sometimes you'll have an SQL statement that you would automatically run, and then sometimes you'll have one, majority of the time, if it's some type of marketing email, then you're going to manually do that. So again, the profile SQL statement is if you are running the most recent version of 16, which is 16.14, then you have this option in the letter scheduler of the Premier Edition. So we're going to switch over to the interactive SQL and just take a look at, essentially what I did was, because I know we've covered the interactive SQL a lot of times, and we like to cover it multiple times, because each time you probably something new sinks in and something you may not have seen before. And so I went out on our forum and I just looked at recent posts on the forum and things that have been asked about, or things that various users had some questions about or had needed a little help or a little assistance. So picked 3 topics here. So the first one is a query over daily ACT. And your daily ACT table is right here. And what this table contains is your daily audit recap. So if we close right here for just one moment, we go to the reports menu, and we look at our day and close reprint. So if I look at yesterday's day and close reprint, all of this information across the top, so each one of these fields across the top here, this is contained in daily ACT. So each one of these fields on this report is contained in the daily ACT table. So for example, and one of the questions on the forum was, I love what's contained in the top half of this report, but I would love to be able to pull that based on a date range. So rather than seeing it one day at a time, I'd like to be able to pull that for 2 weeks. So we're going to take a look at doing that. So we'll do no print there, close. We'll go to Tools, Interactive SQL. We're going to use the wizard, of course. And so our table is daily ACT. That's the table we want to pull from. And then, of course, these are all of your fields. Now, excuse me, scrolling on the table. Click down here. So the check-in hour is contained in daily ACT, and that is one thing that is not on the top portion of your day and close report. That's actually contained in a different report, but that data is held inside this table. So just so you know what that check-in hour is, and it's just calculating for each hour of the day how many check-ins were done. And so the first field that, of course, we're going to want to pull in is audit date, because if we're pulling information into a report, we're going to want to see a date range on this. Of course, we're going to want to see, what were our totals for each audit date. And then we would probably want some totals on how much room taxable and non-taxable. So you have your totals here. So this is your room taxable total. Here's our room non-taxable. Any adjustments that were done that day, and then our overall total. So we probably want to pull all of these in. And essentially we're creating like a recap report and being able to run a date range on that. So if we're pulling this type of information, then we're definitely going to want to know the number of rooms that were sold. And I recently did a training out in Australia at the end of the month, and I wrote this exact report for their properties because they wanted to see not only the number of rooms sold, but they also wanted to see the actual occupied. And the day and close report is one of the only places to get that, because on the rest of the reporting, we do use the rooms sold, because it's the total number of rooms you sold. But this particular group had several days that they were running 100% occupancy, and they had sold a room twice. So they had someone check out early, or check in post audit, check out by checkout time, and then they re-rented that room. So technically their rooms sold were more than the number of rooms they had in the hotel. And the general manager wanted to see the actual occupied figure in addition to the rooms sold. So we could pull that in. And then we can say we can look at our total occupancy, and maybe we want to see our ADR and our RevPAR. So we've just pulled in several fields from Daily ACT that we want to include in this report. So all I've done is just I'm clicking to move these fields over to the right-hand side. So these are the columns that will appear in our report. We can select fix all titles, and that's going to automatically put in the titles. Now, you may want to make some adjustments here, because these are kind of long titles, and so it's going to make it not as easy to read on your report. So we don't necessarily need date for the audit. We know that is a date. So we can change that column title to just audit. And maybe we'll change this to room tax. And room non-tax. Just to shorten these, we could change this to adjustments, and we could say total rev. We can change this to room sold. We can abbreviate and say occupied rooms. And we can set this to ADR and RevPAR. So just that easily, we can change the column titles. So those are the titles that will appear on our report. And all I did was just double click on each one of those to open it up and change that column title just slightly. Now, if we're pulling in some dollar figures, of course we're going to want to sum those. So if we're pulling a date range, not only do we want to see how much room revenue was posted on each audit date, but we want to see a total for that date range. So you can add in a total on each of these just by clicking on the column and across the bottom saying I want to see a sum of each of these. And then you may want to see a sum of the rooms sold, a sum of the rooms occupied. And these, your occupancy, these are going to be percentages. So you wouldn't necessarily want to see a total here. You would want to see an average, the overall average occupancy. And the same thing with ADR and RevPAR. You want an average of these. You wouldn't want a total, because we don't want a total in ADR and total RevPAR. We want to see what's our average. So when I'm pulling a date range, what's my average occupancy, my average ADR, my average RevPAR. Now when you have done averages and you've done subtotals, you'll want to set your format pictures. And all of this is just formatting to go into your report. But you'll want to do your format pictures to make sure that these that you're not getting multiple places after the decimal, because when you're doing an average, of course that's doing division, so you could get multiple decimal places, and that doesn't present a very well-formed report. So you'll want to set your total pictures. And so since this is money, we'll set our symbol. So all I'm doing is just double-clicking on each one of these, clicking on the lookup button, and I'm just saying, okay, this is money, so I want to display a dollar sign on the left. It's showing you across the bottom how it's going to look. So we'll just quickly format each one of these columns.
And I'm only doing it on the total because you don't necessarily need to put a dollar sign on each individual entry on our report. We're just putting the dollar sign on the totals. Because it's less information, less data included on the report. Rooms sold and total occupied, those are whole numbers, so we don't necessarily need to put a format. But on our occupancy, we're doing an average there. So we want to make sure that that's either to 1 or 2 decimal places, just depends. Mine, I'm going to do 1 decimal place, and I want to change my symbol. I'm going to show a percentage sign on the right for my occupancy. And then on my ADR and my RevPAR, well, that's again money, so we're going to display a dollar sign on the left and go to 2 decimal places. Okay, so now we've done all the formatting on our columns. So now when we click on Next, the next thing the wizard is asking you is, what do you want to include in this query? Because I've said that I want to look at daily ACT. Well, remember daily ACT is every single night when your audit runs, there is an entry for every single audit date. So there is a row of data for each one of these columns in daily ACT. Well, if you've been running the software for 10 years, there's 10 years worth of audits. So you take 10 times 365. So if you don't put a where and say which records, you're going to get a huge amount of information if you were to just run this report. So we have to limit and say which records do we want included. And of course I said a date range. So that's going to be on our audit date. And we're going to say, since it's a range, anytime you're doing a date and doing a range, you want to use the last option here, which is prompt for date range. Because it creates, you'll see in just a moment when we run this, it creates a very easy way to put in a date range, and there's even some presets in there, so it makes your reports much easier for the end user. So we click on Add, and that's really the only thing we need to limit in this report. Is we just want to include a specific date range of audit dates on our particular report. Then the next thing it's going to ask you is, what order should these records appear in? So I'm going to present all of this data to you, but what order? And since typically when you're writing reports, keep this in mind. Whatever order you're going to sort your report in should be your first column in your report. It just makes sense. We read from left to right. So if we had this report and we said, oh, I'll order it by the average daily rate. Well, that's one of the last columns in the report. So someone looking at this report, it's going to be very difficult to read and understand, how is this data presented to me? What is it that they're trying to show me here? So when you are writing reports, keep in mind your column that you're ordering by, at least the first one, you may be ordering by multiple columns, but should always be the first column in the report. So when you're selecting what order to put your columns, think about what order you want the results to appear in, and that's what you should put in the first column. And one cool thing you can do with your subtotaling too, if we just go back, for example, if we were running this over a couple of months, we could say, on our subtotaling, if we wanted to subtotal on this group, no, we don't want to subtotal on every single audit date, but we could, since we're pulling ranges of dates, if we were pulling this over a couple of months, we could say subtotal every time the month changes. So if I'm running this for July and August, or maybe I want to look at the whole summer, June, July, and August, then if I do a subtotal on every month, not only is it going to give me an overall total for the date range, but it'll give me a breakout total for every month. That's a cool little feature that's in there, and we'll leave that on. So we'll go ahead and click on Finish, and there's our SQL statement. So again, the wizard will write your SQL for you. You don't have to know any of the syntax to be able to write this. You've just got to know how you want your report formatted, what columns you want included in your report, and what records you want as far as your where statement, and then knowing what order you want them to appear in. So if we run this query, there's that date prompt. And by selecting that range on the date, the very last option, you get this prompt. And so it's a much easier way to obtain a range of dates. And we've got the presets in here. or you can click on the calendar, or you can just type in a date. So I'm going to say I want to look at this for my summer months. So I want to say from June 1st to August 31st, and I want to see all of this data. So there's our grid showing us the results, but then we can pull this into an actual report and be able to see each individual audit date. And then you'll notice, I'm just scrolling down, there's our break on the month. So for the month of June, there's the totals. Then it goes into July. And for the month of July, there's the totals. If I scroll across here, I may not, because of my screen resolution, it may not all show. But basically, it's giving you the totals and breakout for each month. And then you would also get an overall total for each one of those columns included in the report. So it's that simple to be able to take a report that's in Room Master and say, okay, I like this data, but I want to see it in a different format. And provided that it's a fairly simple report like that, like the daily ACT, that everything is contained in one table, it's very simple to write an SQL report over it. Can't do that with every report in the system because these reports are not driven by SQL. These reports are driven by an actual code and application code. But for several of the reports, there's a table that corresponds to the data contained in that report. And like the daily ACT, you can get the data that's contained in there in a little bit different format. Okay, so that's a basic SQL report, and just one more thing I want to cover. I know I'm close to out of time, but really quickly, the reserve total stay function, because I realized that we have not covered this before in an IQ Live, and it's a really cool feature to be able to do some calculations. As you know, the total stay, if you pull up the total stay, so I'm just going to close here for a second and go into any reservation. So if we look at the F11 screen, we go into the total stay. This information right here, your total room, your room tax, your subtotal, daily charges, daily tax, overall total stay. These figures right here are calculations. These are not stored anywhere in the database. And the reason for that is because if it was stored in the database, anytime you make a change, we'd have to update those calculations, or those totals. So it's not stored anywhere. Anytime you pull up this screen, the system is doing a calculation. It's going and looking at the rate on the reservation, how many nights, if there's rate changes. It's calculating all of that information. Looking at the daily charges, calculating any tax that's on the daily charges, looking for deposits to calculate if there's a deposit on there. So all of that is a calculation that's done behind the scenes as soon as you hit F11 within seconds. And so when you go to write an SQL query for this information, sometimes you're looking for this information in a table and it's not there. And then trying to do the calculations using SQL can be quite difficult, especially due to yielding, rate changes, packages, the way the data is stored in the table. So we added what we call a vendor extension. So if you were to try to use this in any other program that you write SQL in, it's not going to work. It would only work in Room Master. And the reason for that is it's what we call a vendor extension. So it's something that development created to give you the ability to have those same calculations that are happening when you open a reservation in an SQL query. Remove this. I'll start with the help text because all of these, there's some very good help text on the using this vendor extension. So when you click on help, of course, it takes you to the embedded SQL report. If we scroll down, you've got InnQuest extension functions. So there are 5 of these functions that are specific to InnQuest and can be used in writing SQL statements. And the one that we're interested in is the reserve total stay. So we're looking at reservations and being able to do some calculations to pull in your room portion, room tax portion, maybe your daily charges into a report that you're generating. Maybe you want to look at your arrivals over the next week and see, what the total stay is or what the total deposits are that are on those reservations. And so you can do that using this vendor extension. So the help text goes over, essentially when you're using these, you're putting in a parameter. And so here's the values for those parameters. So this tells you, based on what parameter you use, which calculation you're going to get. And so 0 being the grand total, including all taxes. So when you're looking at that F11 total stay screen and it's showing grand total, that would be a PARM 0. PARM 1 being room portion, 2 being room tax, 3 being daily charges portion, and so on. Now you can do remaining balance owed, so you can do the total amount minus deposits. That gives you the remaining balance owed on reservations. And you can do this over folios. It's a different extension. It's called folio total stay, and that would be the folio amount after the current audit date. You can also use PARMs 8 and 9, which are your average night without tax and average night with tax. And then those are two calculated fields that are on the total stay screen. So the way that you use this, and there's a bunch of examples in the help text as far as using this and where to use it, how to use it. Now I'm going to quickly go through. Unfortunately, the vendor extension is not something that you can specifically use in the wizard. Now, you can get majority of your report written, and that's what I'll do. So I can show you exactly, you don't have to fully write the whole query yourself, but putting in the vendor extensions, you would be doing just writing the actual syntax and cannot do through the wizard. So for example, if we were going to write something over reserve, say we're wanting to look at future reservations. So we're looking at the reserve file. And so anytime we're looking at the reserve file, we probably want to pull in the confirmation number. We'll want to do the guest name, and we'll use one of the formulas. Remember, we automatically put these in for you now, so you don't have to go through and use the function editor. It automatically ties together, and it's smart enough to know that if you're clicking on formula using the first name, you probably want to tie in the last name. So we'll pull in the guest name. Maybe we'll pull in the check-in date, number of nights, and room type, number of adults, number of children. We'll just quickly write. We'll just change this to check-in just to shorten it a little bit. We'll change this to comp num. And maybe shorten our room type. Okay, so we've got the columns that we want in this report. But we also want to see, maybe we want to see the grand total, and then we want to see a breakout. We want to see the room portion and the daily charge, not so much concerned with taxes, but we'd like to see those 3 columns on the report. So essentially what we need to do first is finish our query in here. So I'm going to put a date range on this because we're going to want to look prompt for a date range on check-in date. And then, of course, anytime you write something over reserve, you always want to include your status. And we want to say that it's equal to R. So we only want to see reservations and status of reserved. And we'll sort by confirmation number. Okay, so we've got our query written. Now we want to add in those vendor extensions. And this is where you would actually be typing this in. So if we say, the way this works is you have to create the column for it to place that, for it to do the calculation and place it. And you're always using confirmation number because it's looking, that reserve total stay is looking for the confirmation number of the record where it needs to calculate this. So this would always be reserve.confnum. Now you can do your as, and if you look above at how these, the syntax, you can usually use the syntax. If you're not familiar with the syntax, you can use the syntax from what's been written for you from the wizard. And so we can say this is our total stay column. Then we want to break that out. And so we want to see, we're going to do another reserve.conf because we've got to pull that confirmation number for every one of these that we're going to do. And say as total room. And then we're going to do one more. And again, this is all in the help text as well. And then we're going to do it a little bit fast because we're short on time. But we'll say this is daily charge. So we've added 3 columns there, each one of them conf num. Now, if we just ran this query, it's just going to put the confirmation number in there. So we have to tell it. We have to put in this vendor extension to tell it what we want it to do. So your vendor extensions go at the very end of your query. So I didn't do a subtotal on here, but if I had a subtotal or if I had any formatting on any of my columns, then you go all the way to the end of the query, and it is the very last thing that you're putting into the query, because technically it's not part of the SQL. Technically, it's an extension that was written specifically for use with Room Master. So that's why it needs to go at the very end. You will always start with reserve total stay. So it's all together. You do reserve total stay. Then an open parentheses, and you have to put the number of the column. So you just count your columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Our 8th column is the one we want to be the total stay. So we tell it the 8th column. And then we're putting that parameter. So remember I said 0 is grand total, 1 is room portion, 2 is room tax. So we're going to do an 8, 0, close parentheses. So what this is saying is, for the 8th column, the confirmation number that's in that column, because remember we pulled reserve conf num, calculate what the total stay is, and that's what goes in that column. Then we're going to repeat this for each one of these that we have. So we're just going to say reserve total stay. Our 9th column, we want to be the total room. So that's parm 1. And then our 10th column, our 10th column, we want to be the total of the daily charges. So that's parm 3. Close parentheses. So when we run this, what's going to happen is instead of getting the actual confirmation number in this 8, 9, and 10 column, we're going to get whatever parm we've put here. So we're going to get the total stay for that reservation, we're going to get the total room for that reservation, and we're going to get the daily charge for that reservation. So when we run this query, of course it's asking for a date range, and I'm going to run this for December because I know I've got several reservations in there for the month of December. Whoops. I have here somewhere. Run it one more time and see what. Well, let me try to take this out and again see where my error's at. No. And unfortunately, sometimes you'll have an error in there. It could be that I've got a space. Let's see. There we go. No space. Okay, let me put back in my other 2. I was trying to space it out to make it easier to see on the webinar, and that's what I get for trying to make it pretty. So there is no space, just open parentheses and your column, and then we'll put back in that parm. Okay. So when we run this, there we go. So you'll see, these are my reservations that are coming in December. And basically here's the total stay on each one of those reservations. Here's the total room portion, and this is the total of the daily charges. So those are those calculations from the total stay screen. So if you've been wanting to write some reports to be able to pull this type of data into your report, that's exactly how you would do it. So those fields aren't stored anywhere in the database. You've got to tell the query or put it into the query to do those actual calculations, and then you can pull it into a report. And of course, you could do subtotaling with this. You can do any type of, you can do averages if you're looking for, the average of daily charges on reservations for any sort of time frame. And again, you can write this over reserve, or you can write this over your folios. So if you're writing it over folios, it would be folio total stay. The parameters are still the same. And if you're writing it over reserve, it would be reserve total stay. And again, all of this is in the help text. There is a ton of help text on this topic because it's a really cool feature, but it takes a little bit of time to digest and takes a little bit of practice in using it. So just always remember that you have to have a column there that is the confirmation number. Or if you were doing this on folios, you would have to have a column there that is the folio number, and then you're doing your reserve total stay. The first field is the actual number of the column in your query. The second field is the parameter of what you're wanting it to calculate, and those parameters are all contained in the help text. Okay, so that concludes our IQ Live presentation for September. And sorry we ran a little bit over today. We tried to get a whole lot of information into one session, but this is an exciting topic for me, and so I love being able to present this and provide some more information on it. So next month's IQ Live, just go to the web page. So remember, you can always check on the IQ Lives by going to InnQuest.com/webinars. And next month's InnQuest Live will focus on IQ Webbook. So if you've missed some of the previous sessions over the summer on IQ Webbook due to being busy, and of course busy summer for everybody, but if things are slowing down for you and you have some time, join us on October 8th. At 2 p.m. and Robert will be presenting IQ Webbook, and we'll also be taking a look at some of the beta sites because we plan to have a few sites in beta by that point, and also be taking a look at a new feature that we added, which is the photo gallery. And so definitely don't want to miss that one, and we'll be covering, of course, the tip of the month, and I'm sure at that point have an update on EMD as well. So again, thank you for coming to InnQuest Live. Appreciate your attention and appreciate everyone that stayed past 3 o'clock hour. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.